right, thank you for bringing us in, and welcome. Welcome again to Live from the Heartland. Coming to you as we do every Saturday morning from the friendly, flowering, and happening corner of London Glenwood. Sweet Home Chicago's Heartland Cafe stage is our home, and we have a great show as usual. We have sitting with me right now, we have Graham Clumpner. We're going to have Ellen Cosgrove, who's going to talk about Peace Players International. And we have a guest in town, Alan Sanaki, who's giving a Sunday morning Dharma talk. And we're going to talk about Dharma, Buddhism, and bluegrass. I love the combinations. But right now, good morning, Graham Clumpner, and welcome to Live from the Heartland.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You made a long trip to get in here, and I appreciate that. We have an event coming up this week that we got hold of, thanks to that endless activist, Hannah Frisch, out there, who's been working closely with Iraq Veterans Against the War. We've had a couple of visits from Aaron Hughes up here on the show. But let's start with the event, and then I'm going to just grill you about yourself, Graham. What is the event coming up this Friday?
Well, thanks for having me, Katie. So this Friday, Iraq Veterans Against the War, which is an organization made up of veterans from the post-9/11 era who served Iraq, Afghanistan, or elsewhere. And we're having our 9th anniversary convention here in Chicago. So this Friday, we're going to have a plenary session. We've got 4 different speakers coming. So Nick Terse, who's done the most in-depth investigation of Vietnam war crimes, will be speaking. Utilizing the Pentagon's own numbers, internal numbers. We're also going to have Soraya Sahar from Afghans United for Justice. She's based out of Toronto, Canada. She'll be down talking with us, and a number of other folks, including Christian Parenti, a philosopher, writer, and thinker. So we're hoping that all of you can come out. It's actually going to be at 77 West Washington. It's the First Methodist Church, and that's going to be Friday at 7 p.m. There's a $10 suggested donation, but what you're really paying for and helping out with is getting about 100 veterans to come out to Chicago and continue to articulate what's really going on with these post-9/11 wars and what militarism really means.
What militarism really means? That's a really good question. We have, we waved the peace flag here before the war started, just like a lot of people around the world saying, please don't start the war. But I know in your bio, you were moved to go into things post 9/11. So Graham, can you tell me what was your motivation then, and if you can share with us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so I was 17 when 9/11 happened, and I think it's very difficult to remember 12 years on, like what that moment was like. Looks like the NSA's getting into physical interruptions.
Live radio,
now.
Yes indeed. So sorry.
But I was 17 when 9/11 happened, and I was looking at college. I wasn't too interested in that, and it was as if meaning fell out of the sky, as if a purpose that I had been looking for finally became revealed to me. And to put it blatantly and crudely, the single objective that I kind of undertook was this idea that I was going to go create justice in this foreign country in Afghanistan and bring freedom and liberation to the women and to
That's
find
the way patriotic 17 and 18-year-olds feel, I think.
Well, there's a lot of patriotic 50 to 60-year-olds that feel that way too.
Yeah.
They just haven't served. So
That's right.
Part of what we're trying to do is actually bring the real message of what war is like back to the American public. There seems to be such a disconnect between the 0.5% that actually serve in the military and the 99.5% that don't.
And one of the things I read in your email, there's a lot of bumper stickers out there that say I support the troops, the ribbons, etc. There was one probably made by The Onion that was a ribbon that said I support more troops than you do, which I loved. I loved seeing that because it's like, what does it mean to support the troops? Driving around in a peaceful place where the water runs and the lights work and no one's bombing you. What does it mean to support the troops?
Well, I think we have to go back to the foundational element of why it is that we are told we fight war. the assumption, the underlying assumption with all of this violence that we use is that this will bring peace. So there was an old term, not from my generation, but from my parents' generation.
That'd be me.
Fighting for peace is like screwing for chastity, and I think that that's a pretty appropriate way of looking at this. I mean, if you're going to try to solve problems with violence, there's only so much you can do. So when we talk about supporting the troops, to me, supporting the troops is providing them, if we have to even have soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, they should be used for, from a direct democracy standpoint, what does it mean to defend the American people, not American interests? Because when we talk about American interests, we're talking about 177 countries that have American bases. We're talking over 1,000 bases around the world. By any definition, whether it's the Roman or the British or the Soviet Union's empire, we are an imperialist empire. And that's not vitriolic, that's not hyperbolic, that's just reality.
Facts.
That's numbers.
Yeah, empire. So, and I'm not sure if you answered how we support the troops just then.
Yeah,
Should I ask you that again?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really difficult question because the support the troops mantra has been something that has evolved since Vietnam. So, with the Rambo movies and these ideas about crazy veterans, there's been this rewriting of history to say that, like, American soldiers coming home from Vietnam were mistreated. And, undoubtedly there were, individual examples of this, but as a structure, the American people have never been given an opportunity to actually directly involve themselves in foreign policy. And in fact, the American government doesn't want that. If the American people were directly involved and were sacrificing for these so-called American interests, I think that people would be much more, critical of what's going on in their names. So when we talk about supporting the troops, putting a bumper sticker on your car is not supporting the troops. Supporting the troops is being critical of what those troops are supposedly fighting for. It's educating ourselves. It's standing up and getting out in the streets because we can't do it alone. And, it's getting people's back when they try to tell the truth and they take a risk. There's a lot of hateful people out there that are going to come after us, and we need someone to have our back.
Amen. Do we have their back? Yeah. Well, a lot of people in this neck of the woods have been marching, and, we marched last May with the IVW guys who tossed back their medals. And as an oldie, I remember the people who we used to put in the front line of anti-war demonstrations were the Vietnam veterans. Once they started coming home, telling us their stories. Is there any improvement on the care that was just lambasted a couple years ago about the numbers of days that guys and women have to wait to get their cases listened to for PTSD treatment or appointments or whatever all? Has it gotten any better?
Well,
the VA.
So this is a difficult question because we want a black and white answer. We want, like, yes, it's fine, or no, everything's horrible. And
we love to ask difficult questions.
Right. So there's a lot of nuance here, and I think the women and men who served in the military, there's 2.6 million who've served since 9/11. And when we're looking at care for service members, it's not just taking pills, it's not just going to counseling, which is difficult to even get people to go to do.
Right.
We're talking about a cultural reintegration that's not possible. This country is not, like, if we go back and look at warfare in the past, whether it's Native Americans or the Roman Empire, we see this structure and cultural structure that allows soldiers to come back from war and tell their story, to share it, to have some treatment and to move through that.
Yeah.
But there's a social disconnect that exists in America because if that sharing happens, the American people would be so disgusted and so turned off by what it is we are doing with their taxpayer money and with their emotional image of America that, this directly benefits the power structure to not talk about it. So when we're talking about medical benefits, people in the military are taught to suck it up and drive on. They're taught to not seek help. So when they come home and somebody comes up and asks them a question, did you kill anybody? How was it over there? Was it hot? These ridiculous one-sentence answers. Veterans very quickly learn that people don't have the faculties to ask the questions. It's not to say the American people aren't interested, but we have not been taught how to have the conversation.
Amen. That's it. Absolutely true. And the news media promotes ignorance day after day by just glossing over the facts of the matter, where we are, how many, what kind of skirmishes we're getting involved with. I mean, right now I'm a little concerned about our amp up of military in Africa, where that seems to be the latest spread.
Well, we are currently bombing 6 countries, and I think it's really important to understand that we haven't declared war since 1941 in this country. And when we're talking about the countries that we're involved in, we've got Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan. And that's not to mention North Africa with Mali and the French. We have moved to a world where we're not doing direct overt occupations with tanks, but dropping drone strikes and sending in special forces and night raids that kick in doors at 3 a.m. So this idea of warfare has been shifting, and it's very clearly to get the American people to not be able to step in and say anything, because it's very difficult to hold a government accountable that hasn't even passed legislation to move forward. So when we look at the post 9/11 world, 5 days after 9/11, you have the authorization for use of military force, which authorized the president, not Congress, but authorized the president to use any and all force to go after the perpetrators or harborers of the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11. That has been expanded now and not challenged legally or congressionally to include any and all people that we deem as terrorists. And what's really important here is understanding that this is not a foreign policy problem in and of itself. It's also a domestic policy problem.
Right.
So with the immigration issue in the United States, you used to have immigration under the Agriculture Department.
Right.
Okay? Now it's under Homeland Security.
Yes.
We used to have the prison system that was looked at as a rehabilitative process, as much of a failure as it was, is now under like the Homeland Security perspective.
I'd give anything for that failing rehabilitative prison system back.
Right.
I'd give anything.
Right.
Today I just heard it, I don't know if Tavis Smiley or Al Sharpton, somebody said today, 65 years ago today, Truman signed the directive that desegregated the military. And one of the things that we are always thinking when we're talking to students, as we did a couple weeks ago about Vietnam, the difference, the thing that gave us a movement against war many years ago was the fact of the draft. The draft.
Yep.
When people were under fear that they would be pulled out of their lives and thrown across the sea to fight in a conflict they really didn't understand,
right,
or maybe even didn't support by then, activated a lot of young men at the time. And as young men started coming back in body bags, it activated more of the middle class, whose sons and daughters, sons back then, were in danger. The volunteer army, you have nothing to compare it to, but
right,
I sort of feel like that has removed the military from the mainstream American life experience.
Yeah.
Is that your
well, I think
read
first
on
of all, it's important to acknowledge that the middle class that existed in the 1960s and 70s no longer exists.
Thank you, Ronald Reagan.
But I would point
And
out
everybody
that
since.
the military, when we talk about social movements and we talk about challenging power, these administrations understand much more about power and social movements than we do. We're learning on the fly. We're reinventing the wheel. They've got a whole database, whether it's COINTELPRO or it's now the NSA looking at all of our internal documents. But
Everyone say good morning to the NSA. Hello. Hello. We're here.
But when you look at the end of the Vietnam War, the military made a very calculated decision starting in 1973. They integrated women into the military. They began to prioritize taking care of families and saying that families could receive health care.
Right.
Children could receive health care.
Right.
Families and children could receive education benefits, which then put soldiers in a position where if you have a family, you have children, you're not going to have skill sets you're learning in the military you can take to the civilian world. So you're in for 20 years, you're in for 30 years, you're in for a career.
Right.
And then on top of that, they moved the draft out of it. So yeah, you don't have the random pull in, but it's become an economic draft. So you don't have a middle class that is able to sustain itself. People are looking for jobs. People of color the white poor, people
Women.
who are trying, people who are trying to get an education and can't afford it are going into the military, and it's essentially the same kind of thing, but it's not spread out as it was, where you might have 15 to 20% in the 60s and 70s directly affected. It's now 1 to 2%.
That's right. Yeah, it's incredible. So this event on Friday, let's recap for folks how they can take part and what it's addressing.
Well, first of all, you can go to ivaw.org. It's IraqVeteransAgainstTheWar.org, and all of the information about the plenary session is there. But it's titled 21st Century American Militarism, and we're trying to tie in all of these different themes and take a step beyond our own experience to say, look, this isn't just about war. This isn't just about my personal trauma or my personal experience. This is about a world that we live in, and if we're not dealing with this as we're all tied together, whether it's through climate change or we're talking about economic reform, we need to come together and talk about this. So it's on Friday at 7 p.m. It's at the First United Methodist Church on 77 West Washington,
which
here
some
in
people
Chicago.
know as the Chicago Temple, right across from Civic Center, which is a great supportive space to find good things happening. Well, Graham Clumpner, I want to thank you for your service to all of us, and apologize for everything that transpired in front of your eyes. And I hope people go out and check out and get educated about U.S. militarism. It's really dangerous. It's really dangerous to have a democracy where people don't know what we're doing elsewhere. As heartbreaking as it is, we need to find out. Okay, let's thank Graham Clumpner for his service, for his time. And we're going to get ever more close to peace on this program today, and hopefully in our lives. So, Rocio, a little bit of peaceful music, whatever you've picked out for us, while we bring Ellen Cosgrove up.
We gotta have peace.